was basically an atmospheric river event, so we had a really strong subtropical fetch of moisture that came in. And this is the precip over that first week. We ended up, like Schofield Pass outside of Crested Butte had 12 feet of snow in this period. Around here, we're looking at between like 5 and 8 inches of water that fell during that time period. So a lot of weight on this weak snowpack in a short amount of time. So I'm just going to start out a little chronologically, and then we'll do some of the greatest destructive hits. In Lake County, these are the periods that really caused us problems. This is where 10 Mile Canyon went off. Probably most of you remember that. This is when Highway 91 got hit. And this is when Twin Lakes, the power lines got knocked out, and the rest of the site, the avalanches ran. Okay, so starting at the beginning. This is infrared photography of some of the work we do on Loveland Pass. And this was one of the first big avalanches that we saw. This was March 1st. We're doing this work at night, so that's where we're using the IR imagery. And you can see the debris coming down. It's going to kind of leapfrog. It's going to jump off the road. There.
Wow.
So that's what that avalanche looked like. This is the exploder. This is the shelter of gas that feeds the exploder. These are remote-controlled avalanche systems. Here's the fracture line that produced that avalanche. Over the next day, we saw a widening natural cycle in that area. This is all along Loveland Pass. And then early, after we were doing mitigation on Dale Pass on the 3rd, we got sent this video. So this is in 10 Mile Canyon, just past Officer Gulch. So we had a powder cloud avalanche that overran the highway. So this is 10 Mile Canyon. Frisco over here, Copper Mountain over here. The highway runs on one side of the creek. The bike path, which is formerly the railroad, runs on the other side. There's a bunch of avalanche paths that we monitor in this area, but we don't do active control work in it. And the reason is because there's not a history of avalanches reaching the highway. The last time that we had solid debris on the road was in 1983. And since that time, we've had about 3 powder cloud events. That's not true of the bike path. There's a lot of avalanches that happen in this canyon. And there's a long history of when the train ran through there of avalanche impacts. These are photographs from a big cycle that happened in the late 1800s. There's also another really big cycle that was documented in the 20s in this area. And that's part of the reason why they put the highway on the other side of the creek. And so although we do a lot of work in this area, we don't do active mitigation. And so we were forced, we had a little bit of a quandary at this point because we started to see these avalanches. They weren't putting solid debris on the road, but they were putting powder clouds on the road. After the first one, we were like, well, we don't see these very much, but they just kept coming. And so we ended up doing a fair amount of mitigation in this area. The last time, there's only one other time that we've done active mitigation in this area, and that was in the 90s. And because of how complex the terrain is in there, you can just spend a huge amount of time. So we were reluctant to do this, but ended up having to. We had another indication that we were heading into a pretty historic cycle. This is a cabin in the town of Gothic. There's a fellow that works at the biological laboratory there that's been monitoring these same avalanche paths for about 47 years. It's a unique data set for us because we have one person that's been doing this for a very long time. This is the biggest avalanche he had seen in this area, and it ran into this cabin. Also, our crews down on Red Mountain Pass in the San Juan started to trigger some very large avalanches. You can see the trees here. This avalanche debris pile covered 1,100 feet of center line on the highway. So we started to get into this break in the weather, and we were trying to take advantage of it. So this is helicopter bombing on the east side of the Eisenhower Tunnel. This avalanche path has not put solid debris on the road since '86. We had done mitigation, putting 7 artillery shells in this path 2 days earlier. So here's the interstate. There's a debris pile. This is the center guardrail, which is 3 cables about 1 inch in diameter. It took the one out of the top and it just ripped it out of all of these supports. You can actually see the cable here. It took it over the eastbound lanes and wrapped it under the culvert on the other side. Here's the interstate, looking up at the path. This is the path that has the snow fences on just on this side over here, just down from the Loveland ski area. And then another look at the interstate. This turned into a 10-hour closure just to clean up that debris pile. So at that point, we had severed the major east-west artery through Colorado successfully. But we took heart that there's a couple other routes. But our next stop was over here at Berthoud Pass. So there's a path there called the Disney Path, and it's called that because in 1957, the Disney company came out and wanted to film an avalanche. They talked to then the highway department, and they decided they were going to trigger an avalanche here, and they set the cameraman up across the highway and up on a hill, saying that the avalanches never hit the highway. Unfortunately, this avalanche crossed the road and hit the cameraman and killed the cameraman and the transportation worker. This was 1957. It's the last time that this path hit the road. So since then, we charged it every year, and we get some big avalanches, but we've never had it impact the highway. Until that day. It's got to come up about 60 feet from the creek there to get to the road, which is part of the reason that it doesn't hit the road very much. So there's the debris pile, there's the loader working on it. Looking at the avalanche path, this was all full of aspen trees before this slide. So at that point we had closed 2 of actually 4 east-west corridors. Then we headed over to 10 Mile Canyon to see if we could isolate something. We triggered about 18 avalanches. I'm just going to show you a couple of them. Most of them did not hit the road, but they did a substantial amount of damage to the timber in that area. And now there's about 21, I think, is the final count of debris piles on the bike path that Summit County is having to deal with. We forecast for their operations to clear that path every year, and this year they said, by the time we're done, we won't need you guys. So They're mostly clearing timber at this point. Here's another one that has some tree damage. So these are all helicopter deployed explosives to trigger slides. Of from that day of the tree damage, raws for scale, and we did do some damage to the power lines running through there as well. Down in the San Juans, it was also an active day. This is the snow shed on Highway 550 north of or south of Ray. So this is basically a tunnel that protects the road from avalanches. Forecasted for scale. This debris pile is about 50 feet tall. That is, yeah. He's a medium-sized forecaster. So that next morning we had a natural avalanche that hit I-70 at Del Pass. That was how I got woken up that morning. It wasn't really that big, and no one was caught in it, but it did close the highway, and so we started to go about doing mitigation through the highway system that morning. The avalanche danger, we set the backcountry avalanche danger at extreme in 4 zones, which is unprecedented. That's never happened in the history of the Avalanche Center, which goes back to '73. And we started to see some infrastructure damage as well. One of the areas that we wanted to mitigate that morning was the off-ramp on I-70 at Copper Mountain, but we couldn't because there was a gas line that was hit, and we had to evacuate the Conoco and that whole side of Copper Mountain. We started to see some additional historic slides. So this is a picture from Frisco looking at Peak 1. This is before, and this is after, and so you can see this swath of trees that were ripped out by an avalanche that morning. We thought that this was a unprecedented event, extending that path further than has ever been before. There's another picture of it. But somebody actually went and dug up a picture from the turn of the century, the last century, 1889, that shows a very similar trend line. So it started to date the cycle for us a little bit, at about 120 years. We also had our first fatality that day over on Joe's Pass, near Berthoud Pass. This was a cat skiing operation that was taking 3 guides and 14 clients out, and they were overrun by a natural avalanche that dusted the entire group, buried and killed one of the guides, and one of the clients was buried in one wave of the avalanche and unburied in the second wave. The 7th, as probably a lot of you remember, we started to see avalanche activity on the highways around Leadville. We had 2 slides hit the road at mile marker 2.5 and 7 on Highway 91. These are slides that are in our atlas, and there are records of them hitting the road, but not since the 80s. You probably have seen the debris from both of these. We started to see avalanches digging deeper into the snowpack at this point with more and more loading, a lot of dirt and continued tree damage. And then that afternoon, we saw, again, sort of unprecedented activity in the sky chutes around Copper Mountain. So these are avalanche paths off of the 10-mile range. They spell sky, which is why they're referred to as the sky chutes. The one that hit the road is the Y chute, and it went through 1,100 feet of timber down into the creek and up the other side before it hit the road. These are in our atlas for threats to the highway system, but there's no record of them ever hitting the highway. So there were 3 cars that were caught in this avalanche. This is a picture right after the avalanche. This is the least buried of the 3 cars. Here's a pickup truck we're going to look at. This vehicle, the windows were blown out, and so the vehicle, the cab did fill with snow. But fortunately, there were no serious injuries. It is lucky, yes. The other car, this is the passenger, the front right wheel and the windshield. So it was lifted up, it was knocked on its side, lifted up about 7 feet and buried fully. These people were okay, the windows did not break out and they walked away from this. This is that same tire that we were looking at in that picture.
That's a good operator right there.
It is, yeah. He did a really good job. Yeah, so this is the road surface here, and so you can see how high it pushed it up off of the road. Okay, March 8th, I think that's when we were shifted to Twin Lakes. I guess one thing to note, I'll get to it in a second. So this is our atlas of avalanche paths that threaten the highway outside of Twin Lakes. On the 7th, the day before this, we were down with members of the search and rescue, and one of the places that we were warning people about was this path here. We had talked to, I talked to Mike earlier in the year about a building that was built there in that avalanche path, which was troublesome, but what we were really concerned about was that somebody was living in a trailer out further into that path, and so we had gone earlier in the year to talk to those people, and we visited that site again this day because we were worried about it. This avalanche path here is the path that ran into the town of Twin Lakes in '62. It is the site of the most deadly avalanche accident in modern history in Colorado. There's still people in town that were involved in that rescue. So on this morning, there was we got a call from the power company at about 2:30 in the morning. Power was cut out, and what happened was this avalanche path here broke through the power line and overran the road by about 200 feet. This was a path that had not been mapped as a threat to the road with work that we'd done mostly in the 90s. So this was a new avalanche path for us. Here's a look at it. Here's the road here, and so all of this is new tree damage as it overran the road. Here's a couple other pictures. Some of you might remember an avalanche accident in this area in 2014 that killed 2 people. This is Star Mountain A path. It's just to the west of the South Fork Road, the trailhead to La Plata Peak. This was the biggest avalanche that we had on record in that path at this point. And this is a picture from that accident investigation. This is what it looks like now. So this entire island of trees, all of this vegetation here has been removed in this cycle. Just up the road, looking at Star Mountain, this is the Star Mountain Pass here. We have the Everett Pass coming from this side. On the road, which runs right through here, you can't tell where the debris is that came from the paths on either side because it's all mixed into one. These lobes here are new tree damage. Where this avalanche came down, crossed the gorge, and then wiped out trees on this side. Here's some of CDOT's work. You can see the heavy equipment here as they're trying to clear the road a couple weeks after this. I think it took them 11 days to get from the gate, from the lower gate to the upper gate, to try to just to get one laid up there. So the next day, we had a major transmission line destroyed in Summit County. This is a Peru Creek avalanche. This power line actually got hit about 10 years ago. At that point, we dated the trees that removed the power line at 350 years old. The trees that were destroyed in this avalanche cycle are about 4 inches larger in diameter. So we're still trying to figure out where that places it, but it's a lot of years. Then moving over to Pitkin County, one of your challengers at this point. So this is looking from the Aspen Highlands ski area out along the ridge line, and the red line shows a continuous fracture line that happened that day.
It only counts as one slide back. Right?
There's some debate there. So there is a house in this path, and Pitkin County actually has some of the strictest building codes for dealing with avalanches and natural hazards that we deal with. So here we are panning down from the path and then looking down valley at the debris pile. And we're going to fly over the house that actually has a defense structure built. It did save the house from being destroyed. It still sustained significant damage, including structural damage.
Were there people in?
No, it's a vacation home.
Thank God.
It'll become clear when you see the size of it.
Okay.
So this is the defense wedge here in the house. That's a pickup truck.
Really heard an avalanche about why you
Well, we'll look at another one. There are places where people have let folks build an avalanche paths with the knowledge that that's what they're doing. That's one approach. So here's the house, the defense wedge.
What's that defense wedge made of?
A lot of concrete and dirt. Yeah, it's a major structure. I should ask the engineer. I know the engineer who built this, but I would imagine that that structure costs more than most homes. So here's some damage to the home. They're just starting to do the work on it, and it sounds like the home is salvageable, but there's structural and obviously superficial damage. We started seeing some roof avalanche accidents right around this time as well. This is the site of a 2-hour burial in Mount Crested Butte. So the caretaker for this home was walking along the sidewalk. The roof slid. It buried him. Nobody knew he was missing until his wife called, and he lived for 2 hours in a t-shirt, fully buried.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he said he was happy that he had his headphones on. So this is a restaurant in South Crested Butte. The owner and an employee went up onto the roof to dig it out, and it slid. It buried both of them, and one of them was dug out in about half an hour, and the other fellow was killed. So it was our second fatality. So back down to Red Mountain Pass. This is the Uncompahgre Gorge here. So this is about a 120-foot gorge. You can see the avalanche debris pile that is above the roadway at this point. We had more avalanches that came down onto the shed and actually filled the shed up. That's the inside of the shed, ripped out a whole bunch of infrastructure. Back over to Loveland. We had an avalanche release above it and damaged this structure, taking the gas cylinders that we used to arm it and spreading them out over the avalanche path. So down in Hinsdale County, about this point, you can see again the precip rates. It turned mostly vertical, and they ended up with a huge avalanche cycle right in this time period. The worst part of this, or the way that we found out about it, was the sheriff's home was destroyed during this cycle at about 6:30 in the morning. This is Sheriff Casey's home here. You can see the dots. These are the dots in the same locations after the avalanche. So the sheriff and his 2 daughters were in the home asleep when it was hit. They had a very traumatic experience, but they all lived with no serious injuries, which is really amazing. We can talk about that more if you like, but here's just some images of the house. This is aerial photography that we did a couple weeks later after the snow started to melt. So here's the house site here, and all of this is debris from the house. During the evacuation, which we helped with, there were avalanches coming down onto the county road that actually separated the rescue teams. So we had to launch a second rescue to rescue the rescue team, basically. They also had some homes hit. This is one in town that was hit with sustaining enough damage to where the occupants had to be evacuated and still cannot move back into it. We evacuated, I think, 58 people during this time period from this area. And then some of the damage that we're starting to find, this is another home that was destroyed in San Juan County. You can see the avalanche here. And this is the structure. That's the debris from the structure. This is another home that was built with the owners knowing that they were in a hazard zone.
Vacation.
Yes. Yeah, there's no winter access to this area. So yeah, it's just below Stony Pass. A couple other, we're still getting a lot of information from Hinsdale County. Hinsdale County has issued their second state of emergency over this avalanche cycle. First one happened when those homes were destroyed. The second one is around flooding that they're worried about from this area. And so there's a lot of aerial photography that's being done, looking at the Sinland Pass and Engineer Pass areas that again are not open in the summer, in the wintertime. And so we're learning more and more about what's happening. So here's a home that has a large pile of timber on the uphill side. Here's another home that's been destroyed. There was a historic kiln from the mining days that the county had just purchased that was destroyed. So we're still learning more and more about what's happening there. This is one of the avalanche paths right outside of town. The large, basically wiped out all of these trees. So we're still getting our heads wrapped around what the actual toll is, but here's some of the stuff that we've been able to document. On Red Mountain Pass, we had a 441-hour closure for avalanche mitigation and debris. So that's all that I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I love the way we do this.
Thanks for your attention, and I will say that we worked very closely with many of the people in this room during this cycle around here, and really appreciate your help and support. And I think that in Lake County, we did have a bit of a near miss in terms of occupied structures and avalanches. And I'm happy to try to help you guys think about that in the future if you want.